Now, the Hargis-Cockrill Feud does take on several forms, and there will be a couple of times that another family will be added into the fray. It is not that unusual to see things like the Hargis-Sewell-Cockrill Feud, the Hargis-Marcum-Cockrill Feud, or even the Hargis-Callaham-Cockrill Feud. This is because even though the main feud is occurring, another family will get involved in the events, and sometimes these are labeled as different feuds entirely. This will be a multi-part section of the Bloody Breathitt County Story, so hang on to your hats and bonnets. We will take this feud as fast as we can, but there is a whole lot of information to go through. We have also listed in this video the tally of the woundings and death, and who is to blame for each of them at the end of this video. This will give everyone an overview of the stories yet to come and how many people were involved. Spoiler alert, not all of them were men. All aboard the Kentucky-Tennessee Living Time Machine. Please fasten your seatbelts and keep your arms and legs inside of the vehicle at all times. But to get going, we need your help. We still need to fire up that time machine to transport us. Please help us by clicking on the like, subscribe, and bell notification buttons down below. Not only does this fire up the time machine, but it convinces YouTube that we need a bigger time machine to reach more people who love history as much as you do. Now, back to our story. Marriage. The whole conflict began strangely enough with a wedding. William R. Swall was born in Lee County, Virginia, but is listed also as being of Jackson, Kentucky, who married Virginia Britton of Virginia in 1852. The Find a Grave website and many other genealogy pages also has her name listed as Eveline M. Britton. There are 2 sons and 2 daughters born of this marriage: Thomas J., sometimes listed as Thomas L., William C., Sarah Jane, and Joanna Annie. Sarah Jane would go on to marry Hiram Jett, and together they would have Curtis F. Jett, the wild dog of the mountains. Please see his video on our page if you wish to learn more about Curtis F. Jett and his family line and his life of crime and redemption. William Swall died in Breathitt County, Kentucky on December 27, 1855, at approximately somewhere between 26 to 27 years old, as his birth date is not listed. After the death of William, the grieving widow would marry John Sheldon Hargis, and they would have 8 children together: Alexander Hamilton Hargis, James Henderson Hargis, Nancy Hargis, Louisa Lulabelle Hargis, John G. Tigg Hargis, Albert S. Hargis, Samuel Hargis, and Benjamin Hargis. I know that this may seem a little confusing, as we have named all 12 children here. However, understanding that there are 2 different fathers involved, but the same mother, and that the children carried either the Swall or Hargis names is important to the story, because in one way or another way, they were all involved in the feud. One account on how the trouble started. When the feud broke out between the Hargis, Swall, and Cockrill families, for all intents and purposes, the half-siblings of the family stayed on one side of the feud and did not fight against each other. This is important to remember because this fight does get pretty bitter and the names will get thrown around quite a bit. The Weekly Messenger reported the following, quote, "According to the local accounts, the trouble between the Hargis and Cockrill families began between boys. Thomas J. Swall and Buck Combs played together. They quarreled. Swall shot Combs. He was not killed, but his shooting did the business." A latent spirit of dislike, possibly tinged with jealousy and rivalry, for leadership in the mountain society, burst into flame. Combs was the nephew of Tom Cockrill. Cockrill loudly proclaimed that the injury to his family must be atoned by blood of the Hargises. Unquote. A little something about how people are about their children in the mountains. It is not that unusual for a fight between children to cause a lot of hard feelings between the parents. There are several cases of people growing up as best friends and being the bitterest of enemies because their children did not get along. The idea of "you never betray your blood" is very true in the Appalachians. No matter who is right or wrong, you stay with and protect your family. According to the same source, quote, that was many years ago, and in the course of the intervening years, the effort was made to make the menace good, and the determination of the other side to be even with the Cockrills have led to some slaughter. The score shows greater activity by the Hargises, but the Cockrill shooting has been more accurate and fatal, unquote. So, even though there was a lot of tries to make peace between the two families, one side was determined to end it by violence. This was not a constant fighting. There were many times that peace did hang over the mountains. But sure enough, one side would shoot a person from the other side, and the temporary peace of Breathitt County would be broken again. The shooting of Judge Cardwell, Jerry South, Fillmore Brown, and the death of Thomas Dunbar. Thomas Swall was intent on doing his duty to the mountaineer justice spirit and settling a score with Judge Cardwell. We are not given the reasons behind Thomas Swall's motives, only what happened and how the community reacted that led to the death of Thomas Dunbar. According to the Semi-Weekly Messenger, quote, when Thomas Swall, intent upon discharging a duty that Hill etiquette transferred to him, shot Judge Cardwell in the back. Something like a public spirit asserted itself, and he fled to Madison County, further west, but not far away. On Muddy Creek he encountered Thomas Dunbar, a kinsman of the Cockrills, and killed him. For this attempt to maintain the vendetta, he was arrested, and his trial resulted in a sentence to imprisonment for life. He served 12 years, and then was released by the governor, unquote. Judge Cardwell was shot in the back, but was not killed. He did survive his injuries. It is fairly reasonable to infer that Thomas Dunbar was either trying to take Swall in for the crime or had intentions to kill him. Either way, Swall did not agree with this and shot and killed him. The trial did not go over very well with Thomas's brother, William Swall. According to the same source, quote, his conviction and imprisonment did not deter his brother, William Swall, from lengthening the family record of crime. Jerry South and Fillmore Brown had been witnesses for the murder of Dunbar. William Swall shot, but did not kill both of these men. He was not even tried for the crimes, unquote. It is not clear as to the reason why William Swall was not tried for these crimes. Was it because both of these men refused to press charges for their woundings? Or could it have been because the Hargis family helped to bury the case? Either way, William never faced any trouble over doing these acts of violence. The unwritten law of the feuds broken. The unwritten law of the mountains is that feuds only remain among the grown men. In no way are women and children to be considered part of the feud and shot for it. This was soothing for the women in the area, as they never had to worry about anyone trying to ambush them from the mountainsides. However, this would soon change as the feud becomes even more bloody. According to the same source, this is what happened. Quote, Elbert Hargis shot and killed Henry Barnett, whose offense seems to have been that he had been known as an adherent, for sympathetic reasons, to the Cockrill family and its resentments. Sally Hayes was an eyewitness to the shooting. Not long after, she was shot and killed by John G. Hargis, unquote. Now, before we get into the response to this action, let's take a moment here. It was not that unusual for an eyewitness to a crime to be ambushed to keep the crime under wraps. As with many feuds we have discussed before this, there were many shootings that have no living witnesses, and the person who did the crime is unknown. However, here we have a case that there was an eyewitness. Could it have been that Sally Hayes went to the authorities about what she had seen that fateful day? And to keep Elbert from going to trial, she was silenced forever? According to the source, she was a sympathizer for the Cockrill faction in the feud. Could this have been the reason for her death? Her murder would not go unanswered. According to the same source, quote, the response was speedy and fatal. Jerry Cardwell, the brother of Judge Cardwell, who had been wounded by a shot in the back from Tom Swall, revenged the murder of Sally Hayes by killing John G. Hargis. The shooting of Charles Everett, another Cockrill sympathizer, by Ben Hargis followed, and not long afterward the same Hargis shot and wounded, but did not kill, Tom Cockrill's brother-in-law, Sam Linsford." Unquote. As far as we can tell by all of the newspaper reports thus far, none of those that were doing the shooting were facing any charges against them and not going to trial so far. But this would all soon change, as politics would soon be involved and the justice system in the mountains would be strained. The shooting score. We will go into more details about some of these shootings and trials that went on, so look at this scorekeeping as a general overview. We found this count in the Semi-Weekly Messenger and thought we would share it with you. Also, take notice of the women's names listed. It was just not the men that were involved in the conflict. On the Sewell Hargis side of the fence, there was Buck Combs, wounded by T.J. Sewell. Judge Cardwell, wounded by T.J. Sewell. Thomas Dunbar, killed by T.J. Sewell. Jerry South, wounded by William Sewell. Fillmore Brown, wounded by William Sewell. Henry Barnett, killed by Elbert Hargis. Sally Hayes, killed by John G. Hargis. Charles Everett, wounded by Ben Hargis. Samuel Linsford, wounded by Ben Hargis. Tom Cockrell, wounded by Ben Hargis. Henry Smith, shot by County Judge Hargis. Dr. Cox, killed. Curtis Jett would confess to being part of the plot to kill him later on. James B. Marcum, killed by Curtis Jett and Thomas White. Willis Gabbard, killed by Jeff Stapleton. Granville Prater, killed by George Barnett, Jr. Hiram Miller, killed by Reuben Landrum. On the Cockrill side of the fence there was John G. Hargis, killed by Jerry Cardwell. Ben Hargis, killed by A. Cockrill. A. F. Bullock, killed by A. Cockrill. B. Davis, killed by Tom Cockrell. Akana Smith, killed by Bud Bohannon. Bud Allen, killed by Joe Haddix. Susan Barnett, killed by Robert Sales. Reuben Landrum, killed by Hiram Miller. J. W. Noble, killed by Jacob Noble. Irvine Newgate, killed by Jerry Noble. Daniel Hayes, killed by Wesley Cox. In our next video, we will be covering the death of Dr. Cox, the death of Tom Marshall James Cockrill, and the saloon shooting between Tom Cockrell and Ben Hargis. Thank you. We at Kentucky Tennessee Living would like to thank you for watching our video series on the Appalachian Feuds. Don't forget to hit that like button, as the more likes we receive, the more likely YouTube is to suggest our videos to other viewers. Also, to receive notice when we upload a new video, be sure to subscribe and click the bell notification. We thank you for continuing to support Kentucky Tennessee Living as we are discovering the mysteries of Appalachian history.